Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's your boy. I'm sorry for the inconsistent uploads, but I wanted to develop a good content strategy for you guys so you guys can stay entertained, get educated, and have me actually grow as a mixer alongside you guys. So I came up with this really cool idea of seeing if I can get a great mix using plugins that were just $5. You heard that right. So each one of these plugins cost me $5. They came as a bundle for 20 bucks. So I got 5 plugins for $20, and I will link to Audio Assault's website so you guys can check out those plugins. I believe they are still on sale as of the making of this video. So again, that link is going to be in the description below so you guys can check out the plugins that I'm using here today. So we got 3 plugins here. We have their channel strip. We have a reverb down here called Echo Verb, and we have an amp simulator based on the Mesa Boogie Triple Crown called the Crown. And again, these each were $5, and I bought the bundle for $20 that came with 5 plugins. Now, I couldn't get everything I wanted out of the mix with just 3 plugins. So what I took the liberty of just using free plugins and stock plugins to kind of just keep it in line of the thinking here. And I figured just sticking with free and stock plugins would allow me to stay within that confined parameter. So we're going to take a listen to the mix really quick, listen for a few seconds, and then I'm going to go through a couple of the elements of the mix so you guys can kind of see how I used each of the plugins. So let's go ahead and jump in and listen to what we got so far in the mix. All right, that sounds great so far. We're going to go ahead and jump in and start checking out what we got on kick and snare. Then I'm going to go ahead and move on to the bass, and then I'll move on to guitars. There's no vocals in this song. It's a completely instrumental band, and so they don't have a vocalist, so I did not need to mix any vocals for this track. So we have a kick in and a kick sample. The sample I chose myself. It was something that I got out of my sample library. So starting with the kick in, I have some saturation just to go ahead and add some beef. This is a pretty cool feature that I haven't seen in some other plugins that are a channel strip nature. So I thought that was pretty cool. I can just turn this little button on and off and then add some saturation. And then by pushing some gain into the plugin, I can saturate the kick even more. Now, with that said, let's jump in and check out what I got for the EQ. Now, the EQ is something that is not very typical for me. I tend to cut a lot and boost quite a bit. And I found that I only wanted to boost around 4K in a bell curve. I typically do shelves around 8K, but 4K and a bell seem to fit well for this particular kick drums. I am not cutting anything at all, and I'm not even going so far as boosting any low end. Again, the kick drum that was provided was already pre-shaped from what I can hear. So here's how it sounds without any EQ correction. All right. And let's check it out with EQ. So basically what's happening here, I'm just adding some smack. So I'll go A-B that really quick. Now, moving on to compression. Compression is typical for me as well. Let's go ahead and start with the ratio first, though. The ratio is 4:1, a very fast release, and a very slow attack, so I can add some punch. So going on to the compressor, I have a 4:1 ratio. I have an extremely fast release and a very slow attack. I want to add some punch to the kick drum and not take any away, so that's my way of adding that extra punch that I'm looking for. Now, because I am boosting extra high end here at 4K, I have this little button engaged, which removes low end from the side chain of the compressor so that it gets triggered more so from upper frequencies. And because I am boosting a pretty good amount of 4K, it's going to get triggered more by the high end, kind of sucking them back down and kind of evening everything out. If I disengage this, it's going to trigger more from the low end, and I don't want that, as I want more of a controlled high end. So that is why I have that engaged. and I'm going to turn this on and off so that you guys can hear what it sounds like when it's engaged and not engaged. So here is the compressor in, and here is the compressor off. As you can see, the perceived volume is a little bit lower, but if you paid attention to the metering here, they're practically the same volume. And I am gain compensating for these things. But the biggest takeaway here is the controlled high end that you're hearing. At least to my ears, it sounds like it's not as spiky, and it has a bit of a more smooth aspect to it. So it looks more like a kind of bell curve versus like a big spike. And that's kind of what I was going for on the kick drum. Now, I didn't really do too much on the kick sample. Kind of the same thing. I am boosting a substantial amount of 1K because I wanted to add some mid-range because of the sample had some mid-range that I found was pretty good. So let's go ahead and pop that in and check it out. So adding a bunch of upper mids, which is what I want, and if I have them both playing together and I mute the sample, you'll hear that it's adding quite a bit of mid-range. And I found that that's absolutely necessary for the kick drum to kind of be present in the mix. Okay, moving on to snare. So we have a snare top, we have a snare bottom, and we have a snare sample, one of my choosing yet again. And I am using the channel strip again on the snare top, and I'm using the clipper on the snare top. So let's check out the channel strip. Again, I have some saturation. I'm surprisingly actually not filtering out anything. I actually hadn't realized that, but we'll go ahead and leave that alone. And I have a substantial boost of high end at 8K. I have a substantial boost at 2.5K, and I'm cutting some mids at 670 hertz, about 2 dB. And I am boosting quite a bit of 175 hertz, actually kind of a lot, 15 dB, because the snare sounds pretty thin without that substantial boost. So let's go ahead and pop that in and out. I apologize for the volume difference there. I know that it's not level matched, but unfortunately the way this plugin works, it adds so much gain that I had to, if you look at the output here, I'm like minus 15 dB. There's no auto gain compensation on this thing, so it's a little odd to use. But moving on to the compression, we have a 6:1 ratio, so pretty aggressive, a very fast release and a slow attack. Just adding some punch to this. I'm using it as kind of a similar effect to the kick, where I am trying to level out the high-end spikes from all the boosting, but also add some punch with the slow attack. So as you can hear, it gets really spiky when I turn it off, and it kind of gets controlled with the compressor engaged. And I was doing quite a bit of compression, about 10 dB. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and check out the snare bottom. This is what the snare bottom sounds like. It's pretty low in the mix. I tend to do that with snare bottoms. They tend to actually really piss me off, funny enough. So I don't have a lot of uses for them other than as a way to add just some extra sizzle and length to the snare. But if I push them too high in the mix, they tend to kind of piss all over other elements of the mix that I don't find very pleasing. So again, I'm saturating it, and I am boosting quite a bit at 6K with a shelf, actually around 9 dB, boosting about 2.5K. And I'm removing about 1.6K because about 1,000 to 900 hertz tends to have these really papery kind of milk. I don't know, papery is the best way I can describe it. Sounds that I don't particularly like a lot of the times on snares. And I'm boosting about 200 hertz, 3 dB to add some extra body. Now, regarding the compressor, 3:1 ratio and a fast release, but a fast attack. So I could just smash the wires and kind of just make them have more length and body versus attack. So I can just kind of add some, again, high-end top snare mic. And let's go ahead and take a listen to the top and bottom snare together. So here is the top without the bottom snare mic. It's extremely subtle, but as you can tell, when the snare bottom mic is engaged, you can kind of hear that it becomes a little bit more lively. There's a bit more mid-range in there, and it has more of the characteristics of a snare drum. All right, moving on to bass. So let's check out this plugin here and see what we got before and after. So here, how's the bass sounds with this plugin engaged. Okay, and let's check it out with it off. So a lot more mid-forward, a lot of the muddiness has been taken away, and a lot of the low end has been controlled. I do have some filtering at 80 hertz, and I'm filtering everything above 7K because I just don't need that high end in there. Now, I have a gentle compression, which is 2-to-1 ratio. I have a fast release, but a fast attack, so kind of smooth everything over because I am boosting quite a bit of 1.5K. I have found time and time again that 1.5K on a bass is what you're going to need to cut through the mix quite often. I'm removing about 2K because there was some weird stuff going on there. I have some 935K removed substantially because that was completely awful and it sounded very bad and weird. And I'm boosting about 80 hertz on the low end in a shelf. So I'm going to go ahead and bypass the EQ, take a listen, and then I'm going to pop it in. You guys check it out. Really pay attention. It's kind of like the weird farty mids get taken away, and the presence and the kind of growl of the bass gets affected with this EQ in. And then again, the compressor is just there to level everything off. I am cutting some more weird muddiness going around at 1 hertz here. I have a limiter, which is also stock to kind of shave off the peaks. And I'm going to share something with you guys that I found I didn't know I had. Apparently I downloaded this and I wasn't aware of it. And it's completely free. It even says it here, it's free, but please upgrade if you can, make this disappear. So they have like a watermark on here, and I do want to support this developer because this actually was so sick and I didn't know I even had it. So what this is a harmonic saturator called M Saturator. Look at the meter here when I have this engaged and when I don't have it engaged. And when it's engaged, it's going to be bouncing around the same area in terms of volume, but it's going to sound louder. And this blew me away. It's extremely subtle, but there's definite difference. It sounds louder without it having any extra volume introduced, which was pretty sick. And then I'm using my C4 multiband trick, but I can't use C4 for this challenge, so I had to use my stock multiband compressor where I'm just compressing everything below 100 hertz and putting it basically on its own fader with this gain knob so I can take away and add sub from the bass as much as I need. So I have that being compressed. In my opinion, this is a much better way to add sub bass back into your signal versus EQ. EQ would make it sound very lumpy. By doing it with a multiband compressor like this, you are achieving a similar result, but to me, a much more transparent way. So let's listen to the bass in the mix, but I really want to showcase the M Saturator. That's actually like the one thing, aside from the paid $5 plugin, that surprised me the most so far in this mix. And it's completely free, so that's the crazy shit. So let's check this out on and off. And when I turn it on, you guys should be able to hear a difference. So I'm going to play with you off. Like the bass is still there when I have it off, but when I have it engaged, it just fills out like the holes and gaps in this mix. Like if I turn it off, like it kind of feels like it just dies off a little bit. Like the bass isn't as strong in the force as one would say. So far, this plugin has been the kind of shining light for me, and it's completely free. I can't keep saying that enough. Now, moving on to guitars, there's two things I want to show you guys here. So I am using the $5 plugins yet again, and it's a very minimal chain, but they were given a set of DIs and given a set of amp tracks. So I started using the predetermined amp tracks that were provided, and this is what they sound like prior to any processing. So pretty flubby. So let's check out the provided amp tracks first, and then I'm gonna switch over to the DIs, and I'll show you what I did there as well. I'm cutting everything out below 73 hertz. Don't need that much low end on these. And I'm cutting everything above 10K out so that I can kind of get rid of that fizzle that tends to happen a lot with guitars. I have no compression whatsoever, and I am removing some 280 hertz. There was some low mid weirdness going on there. I think some cabinet resonances, and took those out. About a dB or two on that, and that's pretty much it. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this bypass, and then I'm gonna pop it in for you guys so you can see what such a difference that this is making. So it sounds pretty thin on its own, but the bass is actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting on the low end. So they're kind of working synergistically. So don't be too alarmed about how much low end I'm removing from the guitars. But if you really pay attention, there's that like kind of sound from the cabinet. Let's hear that again without any EQ. I am removing a bunch of more stuff on my stock EQ. There was some extra mid-range that I found was not really usable for the mix. So I'm gonna go ahead and play that for you. You can kind of see the shaping that I did. If you can see, it's very subtle. There's not a lot of crazy moves going on here. So this EQ shaping that I did was just to kind of smooth everything out. There was too much mid-range, and I just decided to take out some harsh resonances here and here as well. And the last thing I have is the C4 trick for palm mutes. Again, I can't use C4 for this challenge mix, so I decided to just use my stock multiband compressor to simulate the same effect I would get with C4. So you can see it's doing quite a bit on the palm mutes. Not bad, but I wanted to see if I can do better. So I decided to bring out this little amp simulator that I got. And I think I did get a much better result. What I really want to show you guys is this thing here, is this graphic EQ. This thing is sick. So let's go ahead and play that with and without. So I'm going to turn this off and hear how the tone that I came up with prior to this EQ being engaged. Way too much low mids, a little bit too much of the papery upper mids, and a bunch of bad stuff going around. 4K, like that kind of stuff. So if I engage this, that kind of smooths everything out, and you get a much more palpable tone usable in the mix. So that to me is pretty crazy. This was the sickest part of the plugin, I thought. I'm taking about 250 out. I'm taking about 2K, and I'm pushing that up a little bit by 2 dB. I'm taking about 4K out, and that's it. That is literally the only EQ moves I have on here. So now switching over to the channel strip, I'm removing everything below 100 hertz. I'm removing everything above 9.5K. I am boosting, funny enough, a little bit of 7K, and I'm removing more 4K with a very narrow band, about 4 dB, so even more of that is going to be removed. I'm removing 1.1K, that is that milky, weird, papery stuff that tends to happen a lot, and I am removing more of the low mids around 230 hertz. There seems to be some funky stuff that tends to happen there. So I'm going to pop that EQ in and EQ out so you guys can check what it's doing. It's just doing a lot of cleaning up, making it a lot more forward in the mix, and it doesn't have that weird boomy thing going on at the bottom end with the cabinet resonances. And lastly, I just have the C4 multiband trick again with the stock multiband compressor that I have in my DAW. So now let's take a listen to what this sounds like versus the amp tracks that were provided. So after comparing the two different tones, one from the amp simulator and one from the real amplifiers, in my opinion, I actually preferred the plug-in amp tones that we got. They have more of a rich mid-range, and the actual amplifiers, while they do sound better in terms of like the high end and upper mids, they don't seem to cut as well as the amp track. So what are my thoughts on this $5 mix challenge that I told myself? I thought it was actually a really enlightening experience for me personally. I still don't think I'm the best mixer, but I think I'm pretty decent at it. And I tend to leverage more expensive products to get a better mix. But this has taught me that you can totally get by just using, what you have so far. And if you want to spend about 20 bucks, you can get these same plugins that I used and just use stock plugins from your DAW to kind of get a very usable mix. And what's even cooler is that when you do stuff like this, you're put in a position where you're forced to make decisions that are not based in emotion. They have to be calculated because you're only limited to the plugins that you have chosen to use. So that's going to make you a better mixer. It's going to make you more objective. You're going to have to be able to listen to things more clearly to make better mix decisions. And overall, that's going to make you grow as a mixer. So I thought it was really cool. I still think the star of the show for me was this free plugin I didn't even know I had called M Saturator. Out of even the plugins that I have, this thing to me was the sickest shit that I found in my arsenal. I will give you a caveat though. Would I use this more than the actual other SSL emulation that I have? I probably wouldn't. But if you had no other choice and you can't afford anything else, this is definitely usable, and you can 100% use it for your mixes so that you guys can get great results. So in conclusion, there we go. We have a killer metal mix, and all we used were plugins that cost you less than a fancy coffee. It just goes to show that it's not about the price tag, it's about how you use the tools that you are provided or have available to you. So I hope this has inspired you guys to kind of go out and try mixing in a corner like this. I call it putting yourself in a corner and forcing yourself to mix like this. And I want to use more opportunities like this and make more videos like this so that you guys can see me grow as a mixer too, because I don't think I'm that great just yet. And I want to use opportunities like this to grow along with you guys. And we can kind of have a community where we all grow together as metal engineers and guitar players. I'm also going to start planning on doing content that is more guitar related because I am also a guitar player, and I will be doing that in the near future. So check that out and keep an eye out for that as well. I really would appreciate it if you guys liked, subscribed, and commented. Let me know what you guys struggle with your mixes, and I'd love to help you guys out and see if I can make a video for you guys in that respect. So peace out, and I'll catch